And has everyone now been?
We've met before.
Okay, Chair, the recording started and the webinar is on.
All right, then I will call the meeting to order and we will start with roll call.
Chair Stone,
Present.
Vice Chair Barton,
Present.
Member Adamic,
Here.
Member Kuzma,
Present.
Member Fenwick,
Here.
Chair Stone, all PPAC members are present.
Good. Then we will move to oral communications from the public. This part of the meeting is set aside for persons wishing to address the committee on any matter not on the agenda. Speakers are limited to 3 minutes and state law prohibits the committee from acting on any non-agendized items. Recently, regional and local elected and appointed bodies have been subject to disruptive racist verbal attacks by anonymous callers during virtual public comments. The city of Mountain View is fully committed to racial, religious, and cultural equity and justice, and we strive to create a welcoming, safe, and inclusive community for all. This advisory body welcomes respectful and non-threatening public comments regarding matters over which the advisory body has jurisdiction. Comments deemed otherwise pursuant to the Council Code of Conduct and Government Code may be grounds for immediately terminating a speaker's comment period. Do we have any speakers in the room wishing to address the committee? Are there any speakers online wishing to address the committee on non-agendized items?
Yes, Chair Stone, we have. Bruce England, I will allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself and you have 3 minutes.
Thank you. Bruce England, Wisman Station Drive. Just a couple of things really fast. One, the city of Santa Clara is looking at using speed cushions in one of their locations, Benton Street. And I think they're going to be talking about it this week and considering using it at least in that one location. When I look at our NTMP documentation, I see speed humps, but not speed cushions. So I'm just putting a bug in your ear that if you're able to discuss at some point when it comes up, adding speed cushions to the NTMP set of solutions, that would be great. And then the other thing I wanted to bring up is that PDDs, one yet again came up at the CTC meeting last night, and something that was discussed there and that I brought up for sure is prioritizing bike delivery instead of continuing to discuss the robots on the sidewalks or putting devices out in the bike lanes, which are problematic for people who are walking and biking. Finding a vendor who would actually provide this service, bike-based service, can be tricky, but I, for one, would like the city to, economic development and public works to really strongly consider bike delivery there. So likewise with you all on BPAC, if this comes up, expect that me and others will bring up bike delivery. And if you are interested in pressing for that, then I hope to hear your voices on that. And that's it. Thanks.
Thank you.
There are no more online questions.
All right, then we will move on to item 4, which is the consent calendar, where we have 2 items. Meeting minutes for May 13th, 2024, and the meeting minutes for August 28th, 2024. Consent calendar will be approved in one motion unless any member of the committee would like to remove an item. Would any member like to remove an item? All right, do we have any clarifying questions on the consent items? Is there any public comment on any of the consent calendar items? Then we will go to committee comments. Yes, member.
Oh, I would say I'm ready to make a motion. If there's no comments, I'm ready to move to approve the consent calendar.
I'll second the motion.
All right, so motion is moved and seconded. Let's have a vote. All in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Item 5, unfinished business. There is none. We will move on to item 6. And we will start with item 6.1, the Housing Incentive Pool Complete Streets Checklist.
Okay, just a moment. Oh. How am I sharing my screen?
They join that.
Oh, okay, let's try. Sorry, I need to join. Sorry. If you may be from here, it's- Sorry.
Yeah, you should have an email in your inbox that had the invite sent to you that I had sent around this
It's
afternoon.
okay.
I can resend now, but I'm not sure which will be faster. I'll try to resend one now.
It'll be confusing.
I tried to join, but it was telling me I needed to sign into it first. It's coming from you, or is it coming from Zoom?
Zoom.
So send me the link.
And we don't have a chat.
That's it's not. Can you just tell me what the ID is?
You have the agenda right next to you.
Okay.
There we go.
Sorry about that. Okay, so here is the presentation. Okay. So what we're looking at this evening is the Housing Incentive Pool Grant Complete Streets Checklist. So as you've looked at one of these, a set of these before, a couple of years ago for grants. The Housing Incentive Pool is a grant program from the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, and it's essentially a reward for us performing very well on our housing in Mountain View. So they're providing $71 million of federal funds to 15 cities, and they have allocated 1.766 million for Mountain View. And on the condition that we provide, we follow the Complete Streets policy and provide them with a couple of options from which they can choose. So the Complete Streets policy, complete streets are streets that are safe, provide access and connectivity for all types of road users, particularly including vulnerable road users. And any projects that receive any funding or also endorsement from MTC need to follow the Complete Streets policy. So to just remind you, the three basic requirements of the Complete Streets policy are that projects have to implement complete streets that are outlined in local plans and countywide plans such as Vision Zero Action Plan, Active Transportation Plan, that sort of thing. Also, if the project is on the regional active transportation network, then it should incorporate design principles based on NACTO, all ages and ability guidance, and also PROAG. And that we have the list of the corridors that are on the active transportation network, the regional active transportation network there. Also, if it's not on the regional active transportation network or in a local plan, it should utilize federal, state, and local guidelines for determining the appropriate complete streets accommodations. There are exceptions provided, and these are if pedestrians or bicyclists are prohibited by law from using the facility, if the costs of providing these accommodations are excessively disproportionate, which typically means more than 20%, if there are it's an alternative plan for accommodating the complete streets elements, and if there are other conditions that exist that mean that the policy cannot be met. So in terms of how we select projects for grants, there's basically 5 things. First of all, the project needs to have been identified as a priority either in a program, like say for it's a school, or a plan like Vision Zero Action Plan, and also in the 5-year capital improvement program. Secondly, the project should be the funding should be insufficient, essentially, small enough that there's a funding gap. But the project should be big enough that, especially for a situation like this where we have to go through the federal process, we usually require that the project is more than $1 million. It shouldn't be too early in the process, so we need to have defined the project elements and be far enough along that we can deliver the project according to the grant deadlines, but not so far along that actually, complying with the grant deadlines or complying with the grant requirements will delay the project. So it's kind of like that Goldilocks zone. So we have 5 projects that are under consideration for the Housing Incentive Pool funding. The first 3 are Middlefield Road Complete Streets, Moffat Boulevard Complete Streets, and then the intersection improvements at El Camino Real, El Monte, and Escuela. And these 3 projects were brought to BPAC in June of 2022. And we have them on the list because we're doing there's been escalation in a lot of costs since then. And so we're doing another analysis. Robert's team is doing some analysis to understand if there are still remaining funding gaps. And so if there are, we hope to apply the funds to one of these projects or even 2 of these projects. If there are sufficient funds within those projects, we're bringing 2 additional projects for consideration tonight. The first one is Dana Street Complete Streets project. And then the second one is El Monte Avenue improvements. And you'll notice that the number for the El Monte project is the same as the number for the intersection improvements because we're delivering them as one project in terms of how we're tracking it internally in the city. So we will be taking this in 2 parts. We're going to talk about Dana and go through our complete process for Dana, and then we will pause and we'll consider the other one completely separately. Please do not talk about El Monte in this first part due to recusal issues. So Dana Complete Streets, this project includes lane narrowing, road diet from Pioneer to Wisman, protected bikeways between the 87 and Moore Park, high visibility crossings, pedestrian hybrid beacon at Dana and Pioneer, and then slip lane removal and intersection improvements at Dana and Moore Park. And this project is not on the regional active transportation network. And in terms of, so we have attached the Complete Streets checklist to the packet. And we'll talk through this one first. And so the questions that we received, well, last time we were working through the BTA, and these were the questions that they gave us, and I thought they were good questions. So I'm just having exactly the same questions for this time as well, so we get kind of uniform responses. So the questions are, does the checklist make sense? The responses to the checklist, do the project elements reflect Complete Streets elements from adopted plans? If there are exceptions, are they reasonable? And any other comments that you have?
Okay, then let's move on to clarifying questions. Do any members of the committee have any clarifying questions on the presentation?
Yeah, this is actually on the checklist itself, but under, well, I guess for the equity topic, there's the response to the question both says like, I think it was the question asked about, I can't recall the exact wording. Let me pull it up.
You can read it.
Sure. Oh, will the project improve active transportation in equity priority community? The no response on the project made sense. The one that confused me more was the actual textual response where it says Mountain View has an extensive program of affordable housing strategies that are distributed throughout the city. That doesn't seem wrong to me. It's not, I'm curious about what that has to do with the question. I'm just trying to understand how the grants work or the checklist works.
Yes, so this is a little bit different because it's not, we're not really competing for the grant. But typically what we do in grants is, well, we don't have any equity priority communities as designated by MTC in Mountain View, but the city has made a really robust effort in providing affordable housing. And so sometimes we get partial points for explaining what we've done in terms of, you know, accommodating and being inclusive in terms of our housing supply.
Okay, thank you.
Vice Chair Hart?
So my question is the project, or the list had projects with project numbers 21 dash, et cetera. And so some of them have been open for a while. The Dana Street one had something in the header of your slide, CZ something.
Oh, Vision Zero. So this is,
Oh, okay,
yes, this is the recommendation number from the Vision Zero Action Plan.
okay. And then one of the earlier slides also mentioned further back, El Camino Marich, Latham. So further back even.
He's talking about, I think, the.
Oh,
county
yeah.
priorities.
So I guess I know we've talked about Marich, for instance, back, or it was a list of capital projects. My recall is it was pretty low. We have the Vision Zero number, we have other project numbers, and then we have projects that haven't been mentioned here. Ringsdorf, for instance, close to a lot of housing, and I don't know if there's anything depending on San Antonio where all a lot of new housing is, but I think we talked about having a way to track more projects in the past. So, you know, the review seems warranted, but like I said, I was surprised to see Marich mentioned up there. And I guess I'd like to see the total inventory, and obviously I understand the not too hot, not too cold selection criteria, but
Do you want me to explain this one?
yeah, I mean, I guess it's, you know, kind of I know we requested before, more comprehensive view of projects and where they're at. And obviously you look at something to get the not too hot, not too cold, but I guess it feels like we're missing a comprehensive view.
So
Not
this
that it's just for this project, but in general.
So the Regional Active Transportation Network is designated by the Metropolitan Transportation Commission, not the city. And they have provided the lines, but they're fat lines. And they tell us that you can pick one of the corridors from inside that line. So there's a wide line that could potentially encompass El Camino, Latham, or Marich. And I think that we're picking El Camino because we're getting protected bikeways on there, but that's the line could cover all three of them. Same thing with the one that could cover California, as well as, Central Expressway, the Caltrain corridor and Evelyn. So that all gets kind of covered under one line, but we can pick within there which one we think is the one that is on the regional active transportation network.
Okay, so whatever Merritt's proposal was in the capital plan is not a firm project or whatever as I recall, but it was on the list because of the fat line.
Yeah, well, I don't think we have a plan for marriage. We have one for El Camino.
Right, we definitely have one for El Camino. Latham, we talked about years past. I don't know if there's a plan there. Okay, so that explains that reference, but I guess I'd like the general deficiency here in my mind is just the full vision of some of these. So Vision Zero projects, the active projects, the discussed projects. I know slips happen, budgets change. But I guess I just, when I look at something like this or a proposal, I can't reconcile it to all the other projects.
What is your question?
Well, she clarified the details of how these things got here. So that's the question.
Okay, thank you.
I had another just kind of brief question. If you could go back to the map of the Dana Street project. I missed it when I was looking at it before. There is a note there that says protected bikeways from 85 to Moore Park. But that's not, but the highlighted line here for Dana Street doesn't quite go far enough to the left there. Does that make sense? So does the bike lane on Dana Street go all the way to 85? I guess the pictures confuse me a little bit more than the words.
So the project as it was proposed for consideration is from Pioneer to Moore Park for protected. So you're correct that there is a deficiency over 85 as well. So that would be considered separately. So we identified this because based on the description, I should say, based on the corrected description from Pioneer to Moore Park, that is in the 1.7 million range of the proposed grant funding. So if we were to add the overpass to 85, that would include probably an additional analysis to figure out what that would require.
Okay, thank you. So this current project, what we're looking at, it's a typo on the slide, but it's, if I understand correctly, it's because the city is aware that the deficiency continues past where this little highlight is. Okay.
And just to be very clear, so this project does include the Dana and Pioneer intersection.
Yes. Thank you very much for that
Yeah,
clarification.
and it is correct in the memo. So the memo states State Route 85 overpass to Moore Parkway. And it also mentions the Dana Street intersection.
So this, I'm sorry, I'm a little bit confused. So this project does go
Just to Pioneer.
just to Pioneer.
Pioneer to Moore Park.
Yeah, the way it's described in the memo.
From the end of the overpass.
Great, thank you.
Yes.
Which is not, no, that's not where the end of the overpass is. The end of the overpass is further past Pioneer.
Oh, kind of, it's still sloping down, almost immediately it goes up.
So for clarification, I would say that it includes the Pioneer intersection.
Yes.
And
Thank you.
stops at the western terminus of that intersection.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have one question?
No, that was my only question.
Member Fenwick.
Adamant?
Sorry.
Okay. I just wanted to know for the overpass portion, is the project, because it's just as bad or worse than the planned area, maybe. Is the project in a state where funding can be sought for that? Like this segment, it seems like it's ready to seek funding to move it forward. Is the overpass in the same state?
The overpass is probably too early to compete for this particular funding.
But other?
But for other funding, we can look at that when there's additional either state or federal funding available. That would be where we would essentially be in an analysis phase to look at alternatives. A lot of times the city likes to fund those locally and then we compete better for projects that we're proposing for construction. So a project like this doesn't require an extensive planning phase. We can go right into kind of a conceptual design, bring it back here and move that into final design right away. So what I would propose for a project like the overpass would be a locally funded analysis and then a more competitive construction phase for that project.
Okay.
And we could, at that point, we could possibly partner with somebody like Caltrans because it's going over some of their infrastructure.
Thanks.
Okay, we will now move on to public comment. Is there any public comment on the Dana Street checklist?
Yes, Chair, we have one question online. Bruce England, I'll allow you to speak. You can unmute yourself if you have 3 minutes.
Thanks, Ben. Okay, I'm getting echo in my headset, so I'm gonna move it a bit. Okay, hopefully you're not hearing echo.
You sound great.
Okay, so yeah, optimistic Ben, I have 4 things I wanted to say. One is, as some of you know, there is a Google Doc that we set up through the Bike Coalition and MBCSP, tracking what people would like to see along Dana Street, going all the way to Calderon. And so I just want to mention that that document has a lot of detail in it that I hope people in the city will look at for ideas for the project and related projects. And it's unclear to me, except for the funding option, that you have to stay within the funding, that this isn't going all the way to Calderon, because I just want to point out that there are issues all the way between Moore Park and Calderon, including the overpass. So there's that. And then an issue that I've brought up myself many times is the speed limit by Landale's is seems to be 35 miles an hour. There's weird signage about slowing down when children are present, as opposed to just bringing the speed down as appropriate in a school zone. And there's really no point in having it 35 out to Moore Park, because as soon as you hit South Wisman or Moore Park, you're gonna have to slow down anyway and hit stop signs. So I would certainly like to see, as part of this project, a speed reduction. And maybe the speed reduction can happen after the project, where vehicles will, we hope, slow down, and then it can make more sense to bring the speed limit down. But I would like to see that eventually. And lastly, the bike lane condition on South Wisman leading up to Dana is really miserable, and it's been that way for years. And it would be really unfortunate if that stretch like that stayed the way it is, as it enters a very nice and improved stretch of Dana. Probably that stretch South Wisman can't be included, but in the repaving program, I think it'd be great to prioritize that in line with this project whenever it happens, so that that whole stretch could be made much nicer than it is today. That's it for me. Thanks.
Thanks, Bruce.
Thank you, Bruce. Okay. Holger Eisenberg, I'll allow you to speak. You can now unmute yourself. You have 3 minutes.
Hello, yeah. I'm in favor of the project of improving the, I'm in favor of improving the Dana Street for that section for non-car traffic, like bikes and pedestrians, because it's a good low traffic connection between Mountain View and Sunnyvale. Already, just this part is not that nice to cycle along. And I'm also using it, for example, because it's a good alternative. And I recommend, if you propose this project, to point out that most likely in this case, road diet and lane narrowing doesn't have an impact on car traffic in the way that it tries to reduce car traffic. I guess that's not the intention here. And because the traffic is usually low, hopefully that doesn't have this impact, because it is usually the problem for non-bicyclists to approve the project. Yeah, that's all my comments.
Thank you, Holger. That's it for questions.
All right, if we can get the questions back up on the screen, and we will move on to committee comment. I did have one clarifying question I can ask, which is about how much input are you expecting on the actual design of the facility versus just the checklist as presented? I'm assuming we all have ideas on how the corridor can be improved, but we haven't started design yet.
So you're welcome to comment on both of them.
Okay, thanks. All right. Okay. Do we have committee comments? Yes. Atomic.
Yes, so I think the checklist looks fine. I'm very grateful that the city is attempting to gain funding for this important project. My son went to Landals and his friends had to brave this stretch to get to school, which is scary. Some of them then had to brave it to get to Graham. So, and we had to brave it in reverse to go to Sylvan Park for ultimate frisbee. So it was never very comfortable and it certainly needs improvement. So thank you. And for that additional stretch, I had emailed staff before, but if Measure B planning grants are still going on, there's at least in the past, there was an automatic 5 points out of 100 for across barrier connections, which typically are like things that bring you over freeways. For reasons I don't understand, Dana, there's a list and Dana Street over 85 is not on that list. And I just wonder since this is in some point in the future, if one could inquire whether it could be added, because often, I mean, the funding's competitive and projects can end up being scored pretty similarly. So if those 5 points could be secured, that would be great. Thanks.
Yeah, I don't disagree, sorry, with anything from member Adamic. I think that those are all great points. Again, like I hear, we have a lot of places, particularly in this area. We did a walk around here not too long ago, that there's a lot of less than ideal from pedestrian situations. And I understand we can't necessarily fix it all at once. So I think this is a big part of that corridor. And so I'm happy to see that. I think it's looks like the right items for me. I think the road diet, particularly between Wisbon and Pioneer, will help slow that speed. Continuing it over Highway 85 would be nice because that can be challenging as well. But I understand that's not in this specific scope at this time. But I think this looks like a big step in the right direction. And I think this is a great project to go forward. And I didn't see any concerns with the questions on the checklist, the answers to the questions on the checklist. Thank you.
Who's them all?
Yeah, I'll on the checklist, and I think we'll make a motion about that at some point, I assume, but that looked fine to me. I think to sort of put Terry's question into my own word, or into sort of a comment in my own words on like how we look at projects overall. I think it'd be lovely at some point in the future to make sure we're holding ourselves accountable to the like prioritization lists and the such that we've made in the past. Like we did a bunch of work to say, here's the corridors we think are important given various equity issues, given where people actually bike and walk, given what's near schools, all that. And that doesn't always perfectly align with what makes sense for applying for grants, which is fine. I just want to make sure that when we are doing these and as we're going forward, it's like are the projects that we're actually getting funding for the projects that we said are our top priorities. And so having some way to have here's the list of projects that are on our radar, and here's the top priority ones from the ATP or from Access MV or from the local road safety plan or whatever. And, oh, look, these ones just haven't gotten any attention yet, or these ones are getting attention, but are really low down on the priority list, and. But this is a great project, I don't have any complaints with it, so, but I think that would be where I'd think it'd be very useful in the future to. Have more context, yeah.
Great, thank you. So I appreciate the comments on the one end, the Pioneer and Dana, and confirming the intersections included. Mine are on the other end. And these may be more design related, but it looks like there's 2 pork chops islands there or paint, I'm not sure what it is. And there's also, it appears to be a paseo that comes in at the crosswalk. So there's a lot of pavement, and it was mentioned, I guess, aligning or encouraging use of the paseo as a connection safely would be a comment that I hope would be incorporated in design, because right now it comes in the crosswalk on one side of the street where bicyclists going one way would be traffic. You know, access to Sylvan Park was mentioned, so that looks like the way to do that. So my comment is basically just, I encourage, and check looks fine. The details of road lane reduction, larger radius turn, and the connection to the paseo should be carefully considered.
Yes.
I had a clarifying question that I just reminded me of looking at the map. Are there, so for the section of road of Dana Street that goes over State Route 237, does that require meaningful coordination with Caltrans or such? I'm just curious, since it comes up, I think it's come up in the past when we talked about the overpass over 85. So-
Yeah, I'll need to confirm if that is it's a locally controlled road, so I'll need to confirm if it is a Caltrans structure or city structure. If it's a Caltrans structure, often these are done through a permit. So we'll coordinate that through design.
Yes.
I just had a brief additional comment. Just wanted to thank Bruce for calling in and reminding about the resource of people's suggestions and experiences, and to thank for initiating that and gathering all that good info.
Thanks. I had a clarifying question I remember, which was, would theoretically we be more competitive for these grants if the ATP was already completed? I know we included a lot of plans showing these routes, but yeah.
In this case, no, because we're already guaranteed the funding as long as we submit something.
Okay.
So it's just which one they'll choose.
Okay. That's good. We were on a walk recently in this neighborhood, and I remember at Paseo, actually that whole intersection on Moore Park is confusing for pedestrians, bicyclists, and people driving cars. People often don't realize that Moore Park don't have to stop. And it was suggested, potentially putting a roundabout in there, mentioning, I don't know how much space or whatever. I do think because Wisman Road is so short and very much exactly the same situation as Dana, it might actually make sense to include it. I don't know how much more it would cost, but yeah, I would appreciate if you look into that. Yeah, that's it. Happy to see this project. I daughter goes to Randall's, and so they have friends there, and we would go kind of like the distance is pretty much on this map. You could go, from our house, which is just over there, to friend's house, which is just south on Moore Park, and we would not bike because it's just not comfortable. It's cool. We walked once, but we mostly drove, which is unfortunate. It's such a short distance. That's it. It looks good. If should we make a motion on the questions that you had up?
I don't think it needs a motion. I think
It's-
that we're okay with just providing the feedback on the minutes.
So the checklist thing, requirements of the grant, it's just that it comes before BPAC, not that BPAC approves it.
Correct. So
Okay,
they
okay.
want BPAC input.
Okay, okay.
Well, we have looked at it.
Lovely.
Let it be known.
Okay. Part two.
Part two, moving on to Moore Park.
So.
I want that.
Almonte.
So you have a statement that you need to make, I think.
Oh.
Statement.
No, sorry. Sorry.
Here we are. It has the arrow.
So I'm recusing myself from the rest of this item because I own real property located in close proximity to the proposed project on El Monte Avenue.
There's chairs.
Okay. So I can continue the presentation.
Yes.
So this is the last couple of slides of the presentation. So El Monte Avenue, this was also in the Vision Zero action plan. And the elements include a road diet, slip lane removal and high visibility crosswalks, buffered bike lanes or protected bikeways and green street elements. And it's not on the regional active transportation network. And then the questions are the same questions as previous one.
Okay, committee comments or clarifying questions?
I guess.
Yes, Member Guzman.
Yeah, so just my impression of this project is that it is meaningfully farther along in the design process than the Dana Street project.
That's correct.
Okay, and so it's just, we think they're both in a reasonable spot for this grant, it's just they are in different phases.
Correct.
Okay.
I had a question about, there was collision data, I think, included in the checklist that went up to 2019. And then it didn't go past that. I'm hoping it's because nothing's happened since then. Is that the case?
My recollection is that the data was compiled for competition for the original OBAG grant. That was, well, I take that back. That was not for
No,
the
I
corridor.
renewed the collision analysis for this.
Oh,
So-
sorry, maybe I missed.
Can we, have a look? So it might be that that's as far as it goes.
I'm not sure.
The checklist says say 14 to 19. It says during the Vision Zero analysis period.
Oh, I see. That's why. Okay, yes. So that was the Vision Zero analysis period.
Uh-huh.
So, so in that case, it's not necessarily, there could be collisions after that period, but it was pulled from Vision Zero.
Okay.
Was there, I'm sorry, was there, just to follow up, just to clarify, was there a specific question that this was responding to in the checklist?
I thought
It's referenced
so.
in the
It's
checklist.
referenced in the checklist. I'm just going.
In topic
So I
A,
was just
safety and comfort.
wondering, like, did no additional collisions occur or was subsequent data not analyzed?
The latter.
Okay.
Just a small question. I think from reading the memo, it seems like this is a true statement, but is it accurate to say that this, the proposed changes in El Monte have not, changed in any impactful way that should be shared with BPAC since the last time we reviewed what's proposed here?
Yes, that's correct. Since the last time it was proposed here, we've gone through a consultant selection process. We've awarded the contract and we've kicked off the design.
So as part of that process, there's been no major design element changes proposed so far. Okay, great, thank you.
To follow up on that, we will be expecting final design at some point, or is it gonna go directly into construction?
We'll have a design milestone at 35% and bring that to BPAC for consideration.
That was all my clarifying questions for me.
Okay, we can move into public comment. Is there any public comment on this item?
We have no online questions.
All right, then we can move into committee comments. Would any members of the committee like to comment on this item?
I would love to. This project's been a long time coming. I think it's very overdue after having a fatality here, similar on some of our other roadways, including California Avenue. I think this is very overdue, and anything that we can do, including seeking grants for funding to keep the project moving and get it complete, is urgently needed. I do believe this death on this part of the corridor was before I started on BPAC, and I'm about to term out. So that's anything the city can do to keep the project moving forward would be greatly appreciated by the community and our residents. Thank you.
Yes.
I looked over the checklist and it looked fine to me.
Is there we don't know which of these we're going to submit. Is that correct?
That's correct. We're still doing the cost evaluation.
Okay. And so is there a relative prioritization of these projects? Or should we provide input on?
So I think in terms of the city, we would prioritize El Monte because it's already in process. So if there's a funding gap, we would like to use it there. In terms of MTC, I think that they will look at the merits of the two projects and
Because they
decide.
wanted a choice.
They wanted to have a choice.
Yes, okay.
So whichever two projects we present to them, they'll look at the two and see which one they would prefer to allocate the money to.
Okay, okay, yes.
I was just going to ask a similar but less well phrased question. But I was gonna say the checklist is fine. And this project, I look forward to seeing the project happen. So.
Okay, I'm seeing no other comments and no need for a motion. We will ask member Vice Chair Barton to.
I don't have access. Not doing as much. Couldn't even get into the plaza room, so.
That's what Ria does.
Okay, good. Exclusive access, yeah.
After 5 o'clock, access changes for some staff.
Back.
Right. Then we can move on to item 6.2, which is transportation legislative updates.
Okay, and I will be presenting that one as well. My system's kind of going a little crazy here. What is going on? Okay. Close this one. Okay. So this is our annual it's become annual legislative updates. The last few years, there's been a flurry of new legislation. So we started this a couple of years ago, and there was a lot of new laws related to complete streets and parking back in 2022. And then in 2023, you might remember that there was a continuation of that and some enforcement things. So this year's theme is similar: complete streets, safety enforcement, and some governance things. And I would say that the two themes that came out this year were some things to do with technology. There's a few new laws here that relate to technology. And the other one was Caltrans and accountability, transparency of Caltrans. And so the city has not yet received legal input on the applicability of these laws to Mountain View. However, we've provided a lay summary in the memo and also in this presentation. So that's what I'll be providing. So the first theme is complete streets. So our first new legislation was SB 960. This one was long awaited by many people. So what this law requires is for Caltrans to adopt targets and performance measures to incorporate bicycle and pedestrian facilities, complete streets facilities, into their SHOP project. So SHOP stands for State Highway Operations and Protection Program. And that's what they spend a lot of their funding on, is kind of the, like, for example, the El Camino project that's happening right now, that's a SHOP project. It also requires Caltrans to develop public transit priority plan by 2026 and performance measure guidance on transit priority by 2027. And then it also requires Caltrans to develop a new process for processing encroachment permit requests within 60 days. And so we expect that this law will help to streamline upcoming capital improvement program projects for protected intersections on El Camino. The next one we have lined up is Castro and El Camino, which is in the CIP. The other thing is that we recently found out that Caltrans has started a comprehensive multimodal corridor plan for El Camino. And so it's possible that this may tie in, like the targets and the performance measures, and transit priority could also tie in with that process, and we'll let you know as things progress on that. So the next new legislation is SB 1216. And this legislation prohibits agencies from installing sharrows or class 3 bike routes on roads that have a speed limit of more than 30 miles per hour. And that comes into effect on the 1st of January, 2025. It also prohibits the California CTC, which is the big kind of funding commission, from adding to the active transportation program projects that have sharrows unless the project relates to a roadway with a design speed of 25 miles or less. So this is something that we'll be taking into consideration as we continue with the active transportation plan in the city. The next one is not legislation, but a design information bulletin number 94. This came into effect in January, I think it was January 16th of this year, and it provides guidance. It is focused on Caltrans facilities, but because Caltrans is Caltrans, it has implications for a lot more than just their own facilities. And so they connect the facility guidance for complete streets with a context. So there's these different contexts: urban, suburban, rural, and then for each of the contexts, there's modal priority. And they recommend different types of bike facilities by speed. So you can see on this that for over 35 miles per hour, you're in that kind of darker blue area, and that's class 1 or class 4 facilities. And then also on the left-hand side is the average daily trips. And then also they provide standard travelway widths for different types of bike facilities as well. So lots of really interesting guidance here. And as I mentioned, it's applicable to state routes, but it does have much wider implications. In terms of enforcement, One of the new laws is AB 1904, which relates to yield signs for transit buses. And this allows VTA and Santa Cruz Metro and other transit agencies that approve a resolution to have a yield sign on the left rear of their bus, so that people have to give way or have to yield to them when they are exiting from a bus stop. And the signs can be illuminated either when the bus is stopped for passengers or preparing to enter the travel lane. It also requires a public education program to go with it. And I think this is interesting because VTA has been doing a lot more coordination with cities, and this was something that I had actually mentioned to them. The sign down the bottom there that says give way is an Australian sign. It's from New South Wales. And I mentioned that they have like a state law, and they ended up submitting successfully having a state bill that does the same thing on the other side of the bus, because we drive on the other side. So SB 1297 is the expanded street speed camera pilot. So as you might recall, last year we brought AB 645, which had established a speed camera pilot in a number of cities: San Jose, San Francisco, Oakland, Los Angeles, Long Beach, and Glendale. And this law adds Malibu to the list. All the same requirements, but it just adds another city. And it will be effective through till 2032. Where am I going next? Okay, the next one is AB 1777. And this is one of the technology related ones. So this requires manufacturers of AVs that operate without a human operator to have a number of pieces of equipment. So they need an emergency response line, they need a two-way communication device, and they need to allow emergency geofencing within 2 minutes of receiving some sort of emergency alert. It also allows the police to cite the manufacturer for violations of the California Vehicle Code or local traffic ordinances. And it requires the manufacturer to provide the Department of Motor Vehicles with information about non-compliance notices within 72 hours of them happening. So I think this is kind of interesting for Mountain View, given how many AVs we have on the road here. Next set of laws is related to safety, with a number of new guardrails for technology. So AB 1774 prohibits people from selling equipment that would modify an e-bike to increase the speed capacity so that it no longer meets the e-bike definitions. And the definitions are provided below. That's an image that I found on Amazon selling these things. And then SB 1271 it introduces some e-bike battery standards. So it requires the state fire marshal to adopt regulations on fire and electrical safety of e-bikes and as well mobility devices and their batteries. And to provide the test results by the beginning of 2026 it requires the manufacturers, importers and distributors to provide test results on these regulations. And then it prohibits people from distributing, selling, leasing or offering for sale e-bikes, devices and batteries that don't meet these regulations by 2028. And there is an exception for secondhand sales and leases. Then AB 2234 introduces an age limit. It's a pilot program and it relates to the County of San Diego, prohibits people under 12 from operating any e-bikes. So it's specifically focused on class 1 and 2. Class 3 is already prohibited for people under 16. And they have to submit a report related to the pilot. Did this one fall off my ship? Yeah. Okay. I can't see what the number is. AB 1978 allows a police officer to take into custody a vehicle without the person being present. So I think previously they needed to have the person present in order to take the vehicle into custody. It also allows them to take a person into custody for using the vehicle to create a barricade for a sideshow or an exhibition of speed. It's also called a street takeover. And there's been a number of these in Mountain View, as you can see. In terms of governance, we have a few laws. So AB 2086 requires Caltrans to add a financial element to the upcoming California Transportation Plan, which is due at the end of 2025. And the financial plan needs to summarize the full costs of all of the actions within the plan for the first 10 years, as well as revenues and financial feasibility based on kind of reasonable assumptions. It also requires Caltrans to provide an online dashboard of how their project investments are advancing the goals of the California Transportation Plan, and the goals are listed there. So it's increasing accountability and transparency on Caltrans projects. Then we have SB 768, which requires the Department of Housing and Community Development to conduct a study and post on their website about the implications of VMT, how it's being used as a metric for measuring transportation impacts, and the cost of mitigations for housing projects resulting from this, and then also whether the measures have resulted in any project delays in relation to housing. And then finally, we received updated administrative guidance. It's the final guidance for the MTC's transit-oriented communities policy. And that's the end of my presentation.
Thank you. Do we have any clarifying questions from the committee? Member of our question.
So the speed camera legislation said it's in place till 2032 or something like that?
Yes.
So does that mean each city that wishes to use speed cameras has to request being included in the pilot? And more likely general authorization until after 2032. Did I read that correctly?
Sorry, can you say the last part of your
So
question?
it said the pilot, I think, goes to 2032.
Yes.
It's got a designated list of cities.
Yes.
So any other city, such as Mountain View, that wanted to use speed cameras has to wait till 2032 or request being included in the pilot.
At 2032, the idea is that this pilot finishes.
Okay.
So it's not like
nothing happens.
And nothing happens.
Okay, okay.
That's the default.
Okay.
The state legislature could pass a law rolling it out more broadly before then.
But
Yes, or they could just let it finish
Yes.
and nothing
Okay,
happens.
okay, so if Mountain View wanted speed cameras before or after 2032,
Yes,
it has to take explicit action. The current authorization till 2032, as Malibu has done, could be a request to be included in a pilot. And that there's a established procedure for that, or it's got to be another legislative enactment.
so if Mountain View citizens wanted to have a speed camera option. So what Malibu did was they had state legislation to add them to this. And I think that's probably the most smooth way of doing it. But what it means is that we're agreeing to the pilot process, which has, you know, the policy, the impact report, and all of these elements. At this stage, we don't have another way of doing it unless there was a different state legislation that was adopted, perhaps.
Thank you for the clarification.
I have a short question on this as well. If I understood correctly as well, the pilot's effective until January 1st, 2032, which does that mean for all of those cities listed, including there's a couple of our neighboring cities in here, Bay Area ones. They have to, if the pilot just ends and nothing else happens, they have to turn off their speed cameras
That would be the expectation, yes.
All right, thank you.
Yes.
I had a question about the Sharrows legislation. What happens, like, I don't know if this would apply to Mountain View, but can there still be signs that say, like, bikes can take full lane or share the road? What would happen if, for example, when the Friendship Bridge was under construction in East Palo Alto, the only alternative route was a 35-mile-an-hour road, and I'm just, but at least it said like share the road. I think afterwards some sharrows were added, but I'm just wondering if bikes can still share the road, you just can't paint sharrows.
Interesting.
Bikes are always permitted on roads. There's no direction on where to ride without a
Right.
sharrow or a sign, but they're always permitted.
Yes, so I guess that would be the case, but they would not be allowed to install sharrows in that situation, install new sharrows in that situation.
So specifically meaning the painted thing.
Yeah, the class 3 bike route.
Right, and you could also it would prevent, sorry, I'm jumping in.
No.
It would also prohibit it from being listed on your list of designated bike routes. Like right now, we publish a list that has class 1, 2, 3, 4. So we couldn't designate it as a class 3.
Well, the law is about installing.
Yes.
It's
That's
not about what we
interesting.
have on our maps necessarily. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I have, sorry, a question on this one as well. Do you know what the motivation was? Are they, for example, trying to get cities to do, true bike lanes or discourage bicyclists from using these roads or,
I would be guessing, but my guess would be that they're trying to steer, but I think that it lines up with what Caltrans has said in their design information bulletin, that different types of facilities are appropriate for different types of conditions. And so sharrows are down in that, the white area. And so installing them on an area that is really fast is not an appropriate use of I think that they're trying to line things up so that we're clear about where different types of facilities are appropriate.
that makes a lot of sense. Thank you.
I had a question about the AB 1777. I assume that also applied to the personal delivery devices that we're considering allowing in the city again? Or is it specifically only for?
Hang on, where is this one? Where is this one? This one, right? No, it doesn't apply to that. That's not an AV. So the personal delivery devices are not considered vehicles.
Even if they're riding in the roadway?
That would probably require some legal input.
Okay.
Yeah.
Because that discussion came up, why do they have to use a bike lane? Bikes can use roads, why don't they use a road? So if there's legislation preventing them from using roads, that changes the consideration for allowing that they're forced to only use bike lane. That changes, I think, what you think of those options.
So I would add that this is a snapshot and a summary of the language. A
Yeah.
lot of this depends on where it is in the legislative process and
Mhm.
what the exact
Yeah.
wording and definitions are.
Definition, because I think we'd have to look at the definition of AV. And I suspect that the PDDs won't meet that definition, but I didn't dig into that.
Understandable.
My question is, who is the manufacturer? Is that a Chrysler vehicle, or is that a Waymo vehicle, or is that would it be the LiDAR vehicle? Who gets cited, I guess?
Oh, interesting.
Should be a level of legislation.
Yeah.
Which of the manufacturers, if there's multiple manufacturers,
Yeah.
that's an interesting question.
Who manufactured that vehicle then?
Oh, this one, I don't know, this one.
No, I mean, I can see it's a Chrysler.
Uh-huh.
I can see that Waymo did some modifications, and I can see that Waymo doesn't build the modifications that were put on. Which of those three are make it cited for that vehicle blocking?
Yeah, so this is brand new legislation. Maybe this gets decided in the courts, who knows?
Well, or just maybe something that requires more legal analysis that
Yes.
people in this room can
Because it
provide.
didn't say the
Yeah.
owner of the vehicle or the operator.
Yeah,
I think it's in the wake of what happened with Cruise and their pilot over the last year when their operating license was pulled after the incident in San Francisco. So it's kind of a,
Cruise was unique because they were both the manufacturer and
And
the
the
operator.
operator.
Yeah.
Mhm.
As it's written here, it says requires manufacturer of AVs.
Mhm.
But I agree with you. This is beyond our interpretive skills at this
Yes.
point.
I have one more clarifying question about the OBAG transit-oriented communities cycle 4 updates. The city has received OBAG grants many times. Were those grants we received in the past transit-oriented communities? I guess OBAG has many kinds of grants.
so OBAG is, the OBAG transportation grants that we received from MTC, they did require the analysis of the Complete Streets checklist, and that was based on MTC's Complete Streets policy. Now MTC has this transit-oriented communities policy, and they intend that future OBAG cycles would be subject to the Complete Streets policy and the TOC policy.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks. Any more questions? We'll move on to public comment. Any public comment about the legislative update?
Chair, we have no online questions.
Okay, then we can move on to committee comments. Any members of the committee?
Mine's pretty brief. Just thank you so much for doing this. There's, as you even pointed out, there's a lot of more details in the weeds of all of these things, but even to have awareness that they exist is really helpful. And I've never been a huge fan of sharrows in certain places. So I mean, it's interesting. There must be someone else in our state legislature that's also not a huge fan of sharrows, but I appreciate hearing how all of this fits together and really appreciate the overview. Thank you.
Agreed on the benefits of hearing the whole fee.
Yeah, I agree as well. And I appreciated also the context of the 2 prior years because it does seem to all blend together. So that was really helpful.
I had something in my mind. Kind of, given that complying with this transit-oriented communities policy is optional for the city, they would have to do several things, including some zoning analysis and other stuff. And given that we are an advisory body to the council, I was wanting to make a motion that we advise the council that we on the BPAC think that they should comply with the policy so that we can fund future active transportation projects.
Okay.
Yes. I made a motion.
I'm sorry, can you clarify which policy were you referring to?
This
MTC.
transit-oriented communities policy. So the motion is to recommend to inform council that BPAC recommends that the city should comply with the MTC's TOC policy. Is that right?
Yes. So that we can fund future
That the city, okay, can be eligible for future funding.
future grants such as those we've received in the past.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Sorry, I don't know enough about it. Is it like now or never, or?
No, it is
it
not.
Something, I would just like to read up. I just don't feel in a position. It sounds good, but I don't, yeah.
I don't know when it will be next on our agenda. I can
Uh-huh.
provide you with my understanding. I did read on it,
Okay,
read up on it last night.
okay.
There's a few things around housing. It applies specifically to areas around fixed route transportation stations. That is gonna be Caltrans and light rail. Anything within a half mile. Caltrain, sorry, yes, exactly. So there's 5 of those in the city of Mountain View. They would need to comply with several stuff about housing, any zoning for more density for housing and office, including minimum and maximum. And then there's several policies around displacement. I can't tell you the whole thing. It's very long. Yeah.
You're welcome to try your motion tonight.
Mhm.
The other thing is, so I'm just looking at the tout, so we'll be bringing the active transportation plan another time. There will be policy elements to that. So that's another time, if you want us to kind of dig into this further, that could be another option where we're considering this kind of policy.
Okay.
Yeah, my thoughts on this are that it's. My guess is if I look at policy, I'd say, yeah, I agree that we should do that. Not all that comfortable making I don't think people will be all that comfortable. I'm not all that comfortable making any clear recommendation right now, but at the same time, given the time, I just say like, well. I think the goal is to bubble up to council the idea that there's a source of funding we could be taking advantage of.
We have taken advantage of in the past.
Yeah, and I'm not sure the most effective way to do that, but I think that's basically what you're getting at, right?
Yeah, yeah, I did take the time to read it, and I personally would be comfortable with the policy recommendations. I guess, but I can understand why people might be hesitant to say they support something they haven't read. So yes, I think I like if you could bring it back with ETP, that would be nice, and maybe also include kind of what projects were funded with grants in the past. Or some more comments.
So clarifying question, we got to this slide or back to this slide from, I guess maybe I missed the transition from the legislative update to the slide. How did that come about?
This is part of the legislative update, the MTC Transit-Oriented Communities guidelines. Or no, yes, this is
It's not exactly legislation, it's
Oh, okay, okay.
guidance.
That's,
Yeah.
okay, so it's a guideline from
Yeah.
MTC,
Yeah.
not necessarily legislation through
Correct.
a body, okay.
MTC is not a legislative body.
Correct.
Yes. Okay.
Okay, because I wasn't sure if this was earlier from the housing incentive pool or.
Yeah, I would feel better having specifically this be, I probably won't be here when it comes back, but being a topic that committee could be prepared to make a motion on, but I do also believe staff is well aware of these things and actively encouraging council to do things to help meet this so we can get grants, but I can see how, but I can also see how, like, if the council was aware, maybe that might help them make some decisions on some projects or influence how they thought about some projects coming to our council. So honestly, I'm almost thinking I would love for us to somehow educate the EPC on this because a lot of the decisions are made much earlier
Yes.
with the EPC, then by the time they get to council, it's often at this point in time with builder's remedy and stuff, more of a rubber stamp, but I'm really glad staff is aware of this, and hopefully I trust that they are coordinating across committees, but maybe if this comes up as part of like ATP, we could think about something in ATP for how to share it more broadly.
And my question to staff would be, this is transit-oriented communities, is there transit-oriented services or transit-oriented employer policies as well?
This encompasses all of those.
Okay, so the details may bring some of those
Yeah,
up.
it's very comprehensive. It's got lots of stuff about it. Anyway, yes. That was my idea.
So do we need a motion?
Well, no one seconded it, so.
No one seconded it. And I don't know if I need to withdraw. We're doing it another time, is my understanding.
Do we need a motion to request that it come back another time? In regards to,
You could if you want to, because I'm not sure how much work would go into us really kind of understanding it. So
Would it be possible to get a link to the document somehow? I mean, I guess I can look it up, but yes.
I think there's a link in the,
There
Yes.
is.
oh, if it, hopefully it works.
Well,
Alright,
yeah,
thank you.
There was a link in the Word version of it at
I
least.
think in the, yeah, I think in the
Okay, I
legislative
didn't click on
update.
it.
but I think the question on the motion is, we can only make a motion when it's on the agenda.
Right.
And it's on the agenda today, and it will be another slot potentially, but if we want something
Okay.
prepared for that other slot.
Yeah, I think we would, if we want them to spend the time to prepare a presentation on this.
It is 26 pages, so that's, I have not read.
So do you,
It is linked off the memo and it is
Okay.
26 pages that I have not read. I
so
don't,
no one's seconding the current motion.
Yes,
I think and I don't know about if it technically has to be, should be withdrawn, but my question is the chairperson should be making a motion to
Can I make a suggestion?
Yeah.
Item
Yeah.
6.4 is the BPAC work plan for 24-25, and you'll have a tentative agenda list to consider as part of that. You're welcome to make a suggestion as part of your consideration of that agenda for next year.
Yeah, this would be, I think, this would fall under that consent for it,
Okay,
so I think
so-
it's reasonable to let people mull it over for a few minutes as we go through the rest, the next item or
Alright.
so, and then.
moving on. To item 6.3, which is member Onyx, Santa Clara Valley Agency Bicycle and Pedestrian Advisory Committee update.
Okay, so I missed the October meeting, but I linked to the agenda. Things that happened there are a business plan update, a refresh on e-lockers that should be done by the end of 2025, and an update of the implementation of the sustainability and climate action plan. So you can check those out. In September, some cool things are, well, okay, far future, I guess the permanent quarry is going to close down and they have their own rail track. So there's talk of having new transit along there, or transit plus the bicycle pedestrian facilities, etc. So this is like exciting, but not happening anytime soon. There were two different funding sources: the Transportation Fund for Clean Air, TFCA, that's generated by a $4 surcharge on vehicle registrations. And last year was the first year where it was not used for signal timing that benefits vehicle throughput, although it still is okay if it means transit priority. And the funding was not oversubscribed, and Mountain View projects included California Complete Streets and citywide bike racks. That's really cool. Then TDA projects, TDA funds are derived from a 1/4 of the state of California's general sales tax. And I think on the Mountain View end, it was the Miramonte project, or a Miramonte project. And then there's also this Wheels on the Bus program where they're piloting having a way to for people to be able to tell whether the bike racks on the buses are occupied or whether the handicap spots in the bus are full or not before boarding the bus. And that's it.
Thank you. Are there any clarifying questions on? Is there any public comment on this item?
You have an online question.
All right, are there any committee comments on this update?
Just thank you.
Thanks a lot. And then we move on to item 6.4, which is our fiscal year 2024 to 25 work plan.
Okay, that's me again. Find where that is.
I have it here if you want me to put it on.
Oh, yeah, that'd be great. So just going through the updated work plan on the first page, actually under B, just in terms of, there's a couple of precise plan items that have started work in the city. One of them is Moffat Precise Plan, and the other one is Downtown Precise Plan. I expect that we'll have those both come to BPAC. I think the Moffat will probably come this fiscal year, and Downtown, I'm not sure if it'll be this fiscal year or next fiscal year. On page 2, no changes. Page 3, so we added the Bike Summit, which happened on the 29th of August, and Monster Bash, which happened last weekend. And then you just got the legislative review. And in terms of the tentative agenda list, a couple of changes for April of next year. The CIP coming in April. And then we have just a note also that we have a special meeting on December 12th.
Thank you. Clarifying questions?
I did ask this as a pre-question, and Brandon, I thought it was we were gonna get a little presentation. This is actually our first time seeing this plan, since it's been approved by council. So my question is, because our last meeting this fiscal year was with PA back, so we did not look at the work plan.
Oh, I see.
So I had put in a request that we get an overview from staff, because when we were creating our work plan, we had BPAC had a lot of requests for new things to get added, and wanted to know like what changes from like last year's work plan, did any of our comments get incorporated by staff or council? Was
Okay,
my
I can respond
request.
to some of those. So I do have the minutes from March when we looked at the work plan. I wasn't realizing that this was the first time you'd seen this new work plan. Probably would have done it a little slow if I realized. Okay, so there were several motions from BPAC. One of them was a request a work item to discuss potential modifications to city ordinances related to no turn on red at specific locations such as the highway, the high injury network, sorry. This item will be incorporated into the active transportation plan, which is part of item N on this list.
Great.
So that's no turn on red. The second motion was request a presentation from Parks and Recreation staff on how they're planning to accommodate active transportation into their activities and facilities. And this is something which is we consider that to be part of item H, which is the coordinating with city departments and advisory bodies. So we've already reached out to Parks and the Parks Department about some sort of joint meeting or something along those lines. The third motion was Mountain View, that BPAC requests that staff present any precise plans that are in review, including bicycle and pedestrian related elements. And as I mentioned, this is part of item B. So we plan to have the Moffat Precise Plan come at the beginning of next year, and Downtown Precise Plan will come when it's ready. And that might be in the next the next fiscal year, or I'm not sure what the timing is on there, but yes, both of them will come to BPAC in terms of the multimodal elements. And then the fourth motion was BPAC requests that staff maintain a list of active transportation projects that indicate their current status and presents this information on the website with periodic updates at BPAC meetings. And we plan to make this happen as part of item C or F. There has been some conversations on this. It's just hasn't quite happened yet, but it's still on our list.
So if I understand correctly, it seems like there were no explicit changes made to our default work plan to incorporate the requests from BPAC.
Correct, because we think that these things are incorporated into the work plan.
So, for example, the language in B, which BPAC has had past frustrations with, and that it's up to council's discretion which precise plans and which general plans they bring to, we come to BPAC. That I believe that was the intent of the motion, is that more of those would come here, but what staff has decided, if I'm understanding correctly, is that it will still be at someone else's discretion. We will not see all precise plans at BPAC.
That's not our intention. Our intention is to bring any precise plans that are coming through, and we've made that request. So they're not planned from the Public Works Department. We coordinate with our colleagues in planning, but that's also their understanding as well.
Also, I mean, I think the only ones that are in progress currently are the downtown and Moffett precise plans, and sounds like those are both explicitly on there. I'm second guessing what's actually.
I don't see them explicitly. I see Miramonte on here, but I don't see.
Oh, it just says precise plans. Okay,
Mhm.
yeah. Yes, sorry.
And then specifically also with coordinating with parks for H, parks doesn't look like it was specifically added here. But to specifically mention other cities and other coordination opportunities. So parks was not explicitly added, is that correct for this year?
Correct.
Any more clarifying questions?
Any other clarifying questions? Is there any public comment on the plan and how?
You have no online.
Please come up, Jesse.
Thanks. Let's see.
Is this where I stand so they can see me on camera?
Yes, please.
Okay. All right, there we go. Hi, I'm Jesse Cup, local Mountain View resident. I think the BPAC's doing lots of cool stuff. I want to recommend that you, as a committee, do come back and take a closer look at the MTC transit oriented community thing that we saw earlier, that guidance. And hopefully upon looking into it in more detail, you will end up recommending that to city council that they adopt it. And then the other thing is, seems like this committee is mostly focused on infrastructure. And I know it would be kind of a big ask, but if there's any way to get some more policy things outside of infrastructure kind of worked into the work plan, I think that would be great. So that could be things like having the BPAC study the impact that bike lanes and trails have on economic development, public health, how that can affect the cost of living and make cities more affordable, encouraging biking and active transportation. Yeah, e-bike subsidies and like law enforcement or how the policy regarding, you know, how things are enforced, because we could build all the pro bike infrastructure we want, but you know, if delivery vehicles are parked in those bike lanes all day, then they haven't actually made us safer, and that money's kind of wasted. So I think we need to look beyond infrastructure. Thank you.
Thank you, Jesse.
No other public comments? Then we will move on to committee comments. Member Dismal.
Just to get the transfer and communities things out of the way. Let me see if I phrase this in a way that is useful. I'm gonna try moving the BPAC request, the BPAC receive an update on the impact of the updated MPC transit-oriented communities policy on future eligibility of the city for OBAG and other grant funding. Does that sound like that captures the thing?
I'm not sure at this stage that we can make changes to our work plan. This is the plan that's now been approved.
Yeah, it's we're asking that we receive an update on it, which we
As
can
part
ask
of
for.
one of these items.
It could be as part of the active transportation plan. It could also be as part of what the precise plan, since both precise plans could be potentially affected by, yes.
I mean, it is an expansion of scope of the stuff we would talk about in the upcoming year. That is true.
But I think the clarity of the motion I was asking for is just, because I don't think we can ask for a new work item. So maybe if you clarify your motion, specify as part of one of these two work items, for example. I heard ATP or.
Is that a useful?
Yep.
revision? Okay, then I'll revise that. So then BPAC requests that as part of our discussions on the active transportation plan, we receive an update on the impact of the updated MTC transit-oriented communities policy on future eligibility of the city for OBAG and other grant funding.
Okay.
Does that sound reasonably clear? And in order?
I second that motion.
And does that capture the intent of what you were getting at, Chair Stone?
Yes, I appreciate you writing it down in precise language. I am comfortable with the vote, or do we want anyone have any discussion?
Aligns with my thinking
Then
was expressed earlier.
all in favor?
Aye.
Motion carries unanimously. Are there other committee comments?
Just as outgoing, nearly, I know I have one more meeting with all of you, which I'm looking forward to, but nearly outgoing member of this committee. The work plan is an incredible part of what we actually do. It's very easy to look at it from my own perspective, like, oh, yeah, that's just what's coming up. But if it's not on the work plan, we can't talk about it. So I will say, thank you, staff, for putting this together, but I would have greatly appreciated hearing what had happened with BPAC's motions and how they were or were not incorporated. And in particular, I think the asking for coordination with the Parks Committee was very explicit and is lacking any explicit notation in the current work plan. And that saddens me a little bit, as I do feel that often it is hard for us to tie these communities together, because I know it does take a lot of staff time, which is why it is important to have it on the work plan where feasible, to make it explicit so that council and all of staff are aware of the time that will be needed to do this important work. So I'm a little saddened that didn't get incorporated, but thank you very much still for giving me an overview of what staff had considered.
So I'd like to add on to the parks comment. Some of the documents we saw earlier talked about the active transportation network, which include things like Stevens Creek Trail. Earlier, we've seen presentations on the Bay Trail. They're clearly part of the active transportation network, clearly part of significant compute routes. I'm not sure that Parks understands that, or that their requirements for building trails comprehend the importance and the need for reliability of those. And even one of the slides you showed where there was a trail along the road, you could already see the trail cracked because they haven't put sufficient subsurface down to make it a durable surface. That's often the case on trails that they are along the road. The road gets repaved over 20 years, had a gravel base of 12 inches. gonna last a long time. The trail next to it had no gravel base or a very limited one. It started cracking in 5 years, and 40 years later, the road's been repaved multiple times and the trail's still decaying. So I think that's, I don't know if coordination with parks is the right word, but bringing them up to standards that would be expected for the use of parks, which includes transportation.
Yes.
Just this, so the TAL includes a collision data review in January, and that's the next time we're going to see any update from PD?
Yes.
Okay. And that's the reason we've not had a collision data review in a while is because that position had turnover in PD, or?
There was a new person hired into that position. They were going to come today and then they were not able to make it today. So it's just
Okay, and then
scheduling
so
issues.
January, and so normally would have been a once a quarter type of thing, and the January one's the next once a quarter.
I think that was the next time they're available.
Oh, okay. Well, there's only one meeting between now and then as well, so, okay, thank you.
Yes.
I would like to thank Member Fenwick for keeping track of things and also for the education about the work plan, which yeah, I can really use. So thank you, thank you. I wanted to say that I'm still very, very interested in the project list. We saw it come up earlier. It's I think this committee could provide better feedback if we had it. And also I think it would be a really valuable resource for the public as well.
Just a comment on Adamic's comment. It may have been before you were on here. We saw cool demo of like a real-time like project list tool here at BPAC a long time ago, and it was like a prototype.
Yeah, like interactive, like you could
Yes,
see,
it was, maybe you were here. It was really cool, and I don't know what happened to
It
that.
doesn't have to be that fancy. Just it's fine.
You could also just be a list.
Yeah.
Yes. Okay. I lose track of things all the time, so yes, anything that helps track. And yeah, I do appreciate that you give a lot of context in these presentations because it can help remind me of what happened a year ago. So often a lot of time between stuff. I just wanted to make a comment on, we've got a new director of public works coming in. I don't think we can have an explicit item to meet the new director of public works, but I think we would all appreciate if we could be given an opportunity at some point. That's all. No other committee comments on this item, then we get to move to item, what is it? 8.
7.
7.
Oh. Committee announcements, updates, requests, and committee reports with 7.1 staff comments.
Okay, I have a presentation for this one too.
Always fun to get to see what's going on.
Okay, so here is our staff update. Some recent events that have happened. August 29th, we had the Silicon Valley Bike Coalition Bike Summit. We had a panel on there on El Camino, which was well attended. And it was a great event up in South San Francisco. September 10th, Council adopted the Vision Zero Action Plan and Local Road Safety Plan. So very excited about that. And now we're starting to move into the next steps. September 10th, also Council allowed the city, accepted Caltrans funds for the Rengstorff Complete Streets project. So it's a Caltrans planning grant, Sustainable Transportation Planning Grant. September 28th, we had a bike ride for Miramonte Phase 2. So this is the 2 segments of Miramonte kind of on the north and the south. So north of Castro and south of Cuesta. And it was very well attended. At least one of you was there.
I was there.
Yeah. Oh, you were there as well?
I was there for the middle bit.
Oh, there you go. Okay, good.
Yeah.
Lots of really good input. And last week, the active transportation went to council. It had gone to council in May, and they gave us some input on kind of a slightly different approach. So it went back to CTC, and then it went back to CTC in September, and then it went to council last week. And so we are on board with the consultant, we front loaded some of the holistic network analysis and some other changes. And then last weekend, the 26th, we had Monster Bash. We had a family bike ride and the bike circus, which has become an annual thing. And every year it gets bigger. So last year we had 80 students participate in the bike rodeo, and this year 180. So it keeps on growing. We had as you can see in the middle up the top there, free bike repair. We had 30-something people participate in that. There was crafts on the right, the bike rodeos up at the top on the left, the family bike ride. I counted 35 people at that, so somewhere around there. And then in addition, we had a section on Vision Zero, a pedestrian activity, kind of activity that was flexible enough to be used on preschoolers and 17-year-olds. So that was great as well. And our consultant for the Vision Zero marketing and outreach led that portion of it. It's a really successful event. Other upcoming events. So on the 7th of November, there is a stakeholder workshop for the biodiversity strategy. And as you may recall, there's a connection between that and the active transportation plan. Applications are due for new EPAC members on the 8th of November. On the 16th of November, we have a bike ride, community service oriented one. And the 16th of November, there's a neighborhood walk for Miramonte Phase 2, starting at Schaefer Park. And then on the 3rd of December, the community meeting for Miramonte Phase 2, 6:30 p.m. right here. And finally, there's a VTA project, which also is being coordinated with us and Caltrans and City of Palo Alto. It relates to the 101 San Antonio and Rengstorff interchange, and it's a Measure B funded project. They're having a community meeting at 6 p.m. on the 14th of November, and they have a sign up for that on Eventbrite. So if you put it into Google, you can figure out the details and sign yourself up.
So that envisions linking to off ramps,
It's-
on ramps are kind of far apart.
It's essentially two connected interchange projects. Because I think there's an auxiliary lane between the two of them or something like that. Maybe there's not, but there's.
The entrance to 101 on Charleston is technically the on-ramp for the San Antonio interchange, even though it's there.
Okay, so that's the link that they're.
Yeah, so they basically overlap.
Yes,
Uh,
so they're looking at it all as kind of a connected
Thank you.
system. And finally, staffing news, we have a new public works director, Jennifer Ng, who's starting work on the 18th of November. She's coming from Sunnyvale. That's it.
Yes, now we go to oh wait, we gotta ask clarifying questions. Any clarifying questions about the committee?
Just could you or Brandon please email out all those cool events that are coming out? Like
Okay.
just what the list was.
Yes.
Thank you.
I'm
I only
interested in
just-
the interchange.
I only found one of them on Google so far, so.
Any other questions? Any public comment on the staff presentation? Any committee comments? I'm saying thanks. And we'll move on to 7.2 committee comments. Any member of the committee want to make a general comment?
Yes, I, since last time we met, I did, I could have provided pictures in advance, but one of the things I did, I went to Toronto since we were all last year. And Toronto has greatly changed their bicycle infrastructure since the last time I was there, and to be a much more bike-friendly city, truly. They had made some things that I, as someone driving around or even riding around, felt a little uncomfortable with, where they have, one thing I noticed is they have two-way cycle tracks that are on one side of the road, and then there's two bi-directional traffic, and people making left turns across intersections aren't expecting bikes to be coming quote, the wrong way. So I did see a number of times when I was a passenger in a vehicle going, oh, hey, there's a bike coming. And I'm doing that. And so, something to be cautious and curious about when we start talking about cycle tracks. But one thing I loved is where they built up bike lanes where there had not been, they put these little like either flexible plastic not bollards because they're long and thin, but bigger than armadillos. They're about maybe about 18 inches high, but that same concept as an armadillo, but long, 6 feet long, 18 inches high. They use local artists to paint them. And it was a great way of bringing art into the community and like not just having like concrete or plastic, like boring, ugly kind of stuff. And it was really pretty, and I will try to find a picture of it, but it was really very nice to incorporate public art and local artists into just bicycle infrastructure. And that was it. Thank you.
Yes.
Yeah, but trip runners and I also actually traveled since we last met, and there was a sidewalk on that trip. I saw that had a plaque in it that said it had been installed by the Works Progress Administration. And I'm curious if that sidewalk has actually survived for 90 years, since it was in surprisingly good condition. Anyways, the actual comment I was going to make was that just a general reminder of why we're here and whatnot. Since the last couple of days, there were a couple of incidents where I had poor interactions with drivers on the road in Mountain View. I was on my bike, including one time when a driver ended up honking at a high school student who was also riding like a few feet ahead of me. And I don't know, wasn't great. Just a reminder of what sometimes happens. But that's all I had to say.
Yes.
I guess something that's been on my mind is noticing about things that relate to bike ped infrastructure. So specifically for the Moffett Precise Plan, there was a survey that actually had a whole page of questions relating to bike ped things like facilities and parking and so on. But the survey was not widely advertised. And I think it's typical for the people who get notices and who are asked to be owners of property or residents who directly adjacent to a project area. But I feel like for these kinds of facilities, we want an active transportation network. And just because someone doesn't live somewhere, it doesn't mean that they don't need a way to get around town. So while I think it makes a lot of sense to give more weight to people who will be most impacted, who typically are the ones who live right there or own a business right there, I'm just not sure it makes sense to exclusively ask them, especially when such a nice tool as this survey is developed. So separate from Moffett, for example, for bike lanes on Calderon, I think only residents adjacent to Calderon were asked. Unfortunately, the bike lanes were installed, but they were really transformative for me and for my family. We take lots more bike trips because they're there, but we weren't asked. And so I guess just what I wanted to say is that for these things, it might be good to consider more broadly people in a wider area.
I will agree, specifically about, I didn't know there was this Moffett Precise Plan survey went out, which is particularly relevant to me because that is the route I take my infant son on every day to daycare now. I ride on Moffett as little as possible because there's no bike lanes, but there is a section that it's impossible and there's no other route. So to get from that last bit of Moffett on Cypress, I have to ride that little bit with no bike lanes with a little kid in the trailer and, you know, I guess I have some input. So I agree.
Yeah, I would add to the comment, so occasionally on some things, there's sandwich boards up, so not only residents, but employees and shoppers and other people, domestic workers or even contractors who come to the neighborhood frequently and are users of the infrastructure or potentially interested in housing or other facilities in the area. So I would really second, because I've seen the city do it on other types of initiatives, collecting input. Like I said, just for the people who are there, sandwich boards or whatever seem effective to notice it. And people often forget, employees and workers and others who may be out and about more than actually residents are sometimes. One more comment, a lot has been very good. So she mentioned the bikes may use full lane signs on Easton Bayshore Road. That was my commute route. I spent a half hour discussing the need for those with Palo Alto and probably equally long with East Palo Alto. After seeing a university study that Share the Road was confusing to both cyclists and motorcycles, or cyclists and motorists. And the recent fatality in Palo Alto in a construction zone where I believe they were using Share the Road signs, again, is confusing to a lot of cyclists. You mentioned you had made a contribution to the legislation on signage for.
I'm not sure if it was just a coincidence.
So my comment is, Share the Road should never be used by a contractor in the city of Mountain View or by the city itself. It should always be bikes may use full lane, to be clear what the expectation is on both sides. And is there a way to take administrative or legislative action to make sure contractors in the city or the state can no longer use the Share the Road sign? And I believe the bikes may use full lane was recommended in some places. I'm not sure if it's in, NAFCO or whatever it's called, but it tends to promote confusing outcomes, especially in construction zones. In some other areas where I've seen Share the Road on city infrastructure permanent, it's just not clear who's sharing and where. The bikes may use full lane seems to be pretty explicit.
I know people online can't see it, but I found the picture. So you can all see, it's like painted, the light's not great, but it's painted. And I'll show you all after the meeting, but it's a pretty painted piece, but otherwise it'd be just a kind of ugly piece of plastic.
So Caltrans is going to be installing something in El Camino. I don't know if it's that high and I doubt they're painting it. But
Maybe a future project to work with the Visual Arts Committee to get some painting.
I just so happen to have a member here.
I guess, are we doing committee comments on committee comments? I think we are ready to move on to item 8, which is set date and time for next meeting, which is a special meeting, Thursday, December 12th, 2024 at 6:30 p.m. And then that's it. We're adjourned.
Lovely.
Thank you.
Success.